Hi guys, my name is Trinity, and if you are here, you must be here to talk about books because that is why I'm here. And today I will be doing my January wrap up. Now, for the month of January, I attempted 13 books. That means I attempted, but I DNF'd 2 of them, read 11. And I read 4,664 pages, which does mean that I read some short ones this month, but that's okay. And the breakdown of that would be 7 fantasy, 5 sci-fi, 1 contemporary, and 1 historical fiction. And only one of those being young adult. I did have 1 reread in the month of January, but we will talk about that whenever we get there. Okay, so the first book that I read in the month of January would have been the buddy read for the Oasis Discord that I am a moderator for. And that is We Are the Dead by Mike Shackle. Now, if you guys have seen my review on Goodreads of this book, you will already know that I loved it and I gave it 4 stars. This is a very character-driven story. However, the story is pushed forward. It keeps moving, regardless of the fact that it has very little plot to rely on, but extenuating circumstances, outside forces are pushing this story forward. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. There are so many characters in this book that are very nuanced. Every voice is different, and that is something that is very hard for a lot of authors to do, but it came together here. This is grimdark, and it's set with war. Like, we're in the beginning stages, end stages of a war, beginning stages of a rebellion. So there's a lot of stuff that happens that is dark. There are a lot of things associated with war that will come up. So be aware of trigger warnings going into this. There is a little paper here. That is because my friend Andrew bought the book for me for Christmas, and then we ended up buddy reading it on the Discord. So he loved it too. If you guys don't know, me and my friend Andrew are at opposite ends of the reading spectrum, whereas he is very character focused and I am very plot focused. And we both loved this. So he gave it a 4.5. I gave it 4 stars. It was great. There is a toddler in this story, and they act like a toddler. There is a POV in here that I didn't care for. Every time she showed up on page, I knew we were going to get some form of whininess. But everything else about this book was so well done. And I don't know if I am faulting Mike Shackle for writing a character that I absolutely hate, but it borderlined on Ren from the Poppy War. So if Ren didn't bother you, the character in here is not likely to bother you. Okay, following along with my fixation that I have had over the last few months, you guys know it is Star Wars, and I read the 3 novelizations of the sequel movies, and that would be Rey and Kylo Ren. So The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker. I had heard that there are things in the novelizations that weren't in the movie, and they're pretty big things. So I just had to pick them up, had to read them, and figure out what the heck everyone was talking about. And let me tell you, they were well worth the read. The second one was kind of a regurgitation of what the movie was, but the first and the third really brought a lot more to the characters in the sequel movies, and I really enjoyed it. And I won't give away the ending of the book because it does end a little differently than the movie does, and I appreciated it a lot more because if you're a fan, even if you're not a fan of the way that movie ends, then you will know that there was something missing at the end of that movie that should have been there. And the novel provides it. So I was very happy with that. And if you're not a Star Wars fan, I'm sorry, I'm stuck in that mindset. And then on that same note, I am addicted to Reylo. I'll just admit it now. And I read The Love Hypothesis, Ali Hazelwood. I have purchased this book since I read it. So I got the audio. And oh my goodness, this book, guys, it's so cute. It's fun, it's cute. There is a miscommunication trope, which you guys know I really hate, but in this book, it kind of made sense. And so I was like, okay, we can forgive this because of these circumstances. But other than that, you know, it was adorable. And this book was originally a Reylo fan fiction and got turned into a novel. It's so good. It's really just so good. And I love the way everything plays out. I love the tropes used in this. The romance tropes are spot on. And Ali Hazelwood, she just knows what she is doing with these characters. And I'm very excited because I have learned since reading this that she does write quite a few books involving STEM and women in STEM. So that is really cool. And I will probably be picking up more books of hers. I did give this book 5 stars because for what it is, it does everything perfectly. Next, I read another book that Andrew purchased for me for Christmas, and that would be All the Murmuring Bones. This book was really, really good. It has a slow start. I should start by saying that this is a very gothic novel, and if you're not used to the gothic setup, they're always slow. They're always a build-up to the horror of the story, and I really loved this book, and it took me, I want to say I was about 25% of the way through before it hit its stride and really just sucked me in. I ended up giving this book 4 stars, but I really loved all of the elements that came together when the story starts to hit its stride. And if you're looking for a book about scary mermaids, here it is. Here it is. I just adored so many things about this, and I'm having trouble gathering my thoughts on this book because I'm trying not to spoil certain elements of it. But we have a family who is a seafaring family. They've made their trade on the sea, and they have struck deals with the merfolk to have safe passage. Well, this family breaks the deal that they have with the merfolk, and the merfolk start to try and get their revenge on the family for not following through. It's just so cool to watch all of the elements of this story unfold and our main character's journey as she tries to figure out what the heck is going on, because she knows the tales, she knows the lore behind her family, but she doesn't really understand what is going on or why things around her seem to be getting ever more chaotic. And it's just so good. It's so good. And like I said, I highly recommend this if you're looking for a gothic horror novel. I highly recommend this if you like a slow build novel. And I definitely recommend this if you're looking for some scary mermaids, because this does provide that. All right, next we have a book that I have been dying to get to. You guys know that I love Norse mythology, and I won this in November of last year and then just never got around to reading it because I don't know. I don't know why I put it off. But then on the Discord, we were talking, and one of the guys read it and was like, Trinity, you're going to love this. You've got to pick it up. And so I did. And that's Truth and Other Lies by Lyra Wolf. This is a romance about Loki. And there are more elements to this story than romance. A lot more. There's a lot more Norse tales involved in this story than a romance, but it does kind of center around the romance and why he's in trouble. And so I really enjoyed this. And let's talk about smut for a second, because there's a lot of times, especially in fantasy novels, where it is just not done well at all. Lyra Wolf definitely does the smut justice. So if you do like that in your stories, I would highly recommend this. If you don't, I would say probably steer clear. But if you are a fan of Loki, I would still pick it up, because there is so much lore tied into this story and it makes it so good. And the relationships that are in this, all so well done. I was crying at the end, even though I knew what was coming. I knew what was coming, and still I cried. But it is absolutely fantastic. I do believe I gave this 4 stars, maybe 4.5, but I am excited to continue with this series. While on the Oasis Discord, I let myself fall into the trashy novel romance group thing that we had going on. And everybody started asking me for recommendations. If you don't know, yes, I like trashy romance novels. And I started giving recommendations. Well, then someone started reading my favorite trashy romance, and I'm like, okay, I have to read it again. And that would be Goddess of the Rose by PC Cass. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. Obviously, I gave it 5 stars. It is my favorite trashy romance novel. But it is Beauty and the Beast retold, and the goddesses are kind of swapping places with mortals because they've had their time and they do not want to do it anymore. And so they are bringing women to the fold to take their places. And so I just love the way this story plays out. It's really good. There are some content warnings for it. Be keeping in mind that it is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. And I just think it is so good. It's one of those romances that if you love Beauty and the Beast, you're probably going to like it. And the good thing about this series, or the fun thing about this series, is they are all kind of fairy tale retellings from a goddess perspective. And so they're really fun just to get involved in and see how they play out. There's The Little Mermaid, there's Beauty and the Beast. I can't think of all of them off the top of my head, but they are really good. Okay, next I started The Red Knight by Miles Cameron, and I DNF'd it. So I was talking to my friend Dom on Discord and Terry on Discord, and they were talking about certain things in this book that they didn't like. And I'm one of those people that if something is under the spoiler tag, I'm probably not going to click on it just because I don't like spoilers at all. So I never found out exactly what they were talking about. But getting into this story really felt like it had no direction. And for me, a plot-driven reader, I was really, really bored with the fact that it seemed to be so meandering, and it might have come together later. I don't know. But I was a little put off by the fact that Dom was just absolutely not liking the book, and then Terry read it and then absolutely just didn't like the book. And I was to the point that I was so bored that I was like, okay, if they didn't like it and I'm bored, what is the redeeming factor here? So I set the book down and just didn't pick it back up. And so I'm going to go ahead and permanently DNF it because I really don't see myself going back to it after all of that. And thinking, you know, knowing in my head that I was bored for the 25-ish% of it that I read, and I wasn't really clicking with the writing style. I don't know what it was about the writing style that bugged me, but it wasn't really all that engaging. And I can't point my finger to one specific thing and say why. But I do think that it had to do with it being fairly character driven. And I was not looking for a character driven book either. I was looking for a plot driven book. That was actually one of the books that was recommended to me because I'm a plot driven reader, but I just was not vibing with it. And I do plan to read more Miles Cameron and see if it was just that particular book or those particular characters or what it was about that specific book that I didn't like. Because like I said, I can't really point to one specific thing and say I didn't like it. I was just bored. So for the badges that we are doing on the Oasis Discord, one of them was to read a book based on an RPG game. So of course I read something Mass Effect. And I read Mass Effect Andromeda, Annihilation. I wanted to know what happened to the Quarian arc. I caved. I am one of those fans that just needed to know. Am I mad that we may never get a second game? Yeah, a little bit. But I really needed to know what happened to the Quarian arc. And let me tell you, this book was good, but it was bleak. And if you want to know what happens to the Quarian arc, go ahead and read it. But it's not happy. It is not a happy ending. And I'm okay with that. I think I'm okay with that. I don't always want to accept the not so happy endings, as you guys know. I do not like the ending of Mass Effect 3, but again, this is just one of my former fixations creeping in to say hi and fulfilling a badge for the Oasis badge bingo. Okay, so next I attempted to read the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin. Now, this book, I never really got invested in it. The writing is really good. I really enjoyed the writing style, but there were so many mundane things happening within the story that I just didn't care about. And by the time I got to a certain point, I just didn't care at all. And it's really hard for me as a plot-driven reader to say, oh, I hated it because of this. I didn't really hate it, but you know, I had to set it down. But let me say, the way my brain works, I stopped processing this book about a quarter of the way through. And when I stop processing it, I know that I'm not going to be able to read the rest of the book. It's just the tone that is set. It's the pacing. My brain will just automatically be like, don't want it. Like I said, it's really well written. There are a lot of creative things going on that I wish I could have seen play out, but I wasn't interested at a certain point, and I got bored. So that's all I have to say about that. Next, I read Engines of Empire by R.S. Ford. I was pleasantly surprised by this book. I don't know what I was expecting. I have not read R.S. Ford before, though I do have another book of theirs. So the setup of this book really reminds me of Malice, and the way that we are getting all of these different perspectives of the same event. And while we are getting all of these different perspectives of this same event, all of these characters are in different places, but it centers around one family. And so you get to see the ties that this family has to each other, the ties that this family has to the land, the ties that this family has to politics. And so it makes the Engines of Empire really like resonate, because you get to see how all of these things function in a really great way. And we have the family that we follow is really high in the politics of this world. And so everything kind of revolves around them, but it's not in a way where they're the king or one of them is the king. And, you know, they don't rule. They are part of the ruling class, but they don't rule themselves. And with every POV that is put forth, there's a different aspect of the story put forth. And I love that. I really don't like going into multiple POVs where we're looking at the same time frame and getting a regurgitation of the previous chapter from this person's perspective, or continuing the perspective and shifting hard, like banking hard on that POV. I really don't like either one of those. But the way this is set up, we have one of these sons who is an artificer, and something happens to him and he gets shipped off. That's all I can say without spoilers. But the mother sends someone after him to bring him back home. And so most of his journey is him getting shipped off and trying to find his way back home. And then we have the daughter who is supposed to be taking over when her mother is done. She is on her way to being the head of the house and being the head of their particular guild, I guess I should say. And she ends up coming into contact with the natives of this island that she is on while she's training to take over for her mom. And she gets really wrapped up in the world of the natives. And it's really, really interesting. And this also fulfilled my Indigenous badge for the badge bingo because of this. It focuses heavily on the Indigenous people whenever we are in her POV. And it is so cool watching her go from this spoiled little brat, kind of, to having to take on the role that she never wanted in a very different way than what anybody anticipated she was going to do. Another POV is the other brother, and he is military, and he gets shipped off to his first post, and he holds a very dark family secret. The reason that he wants to be shipped off is because he's mad at his mom. And that does kind of play into the story a little bit, where He is unnecessarily angry a lot of the time and makes bad decisions because of it, but it doesn't stick. And so I appreciated that about his character, that, you know, by the end of the book, he has a character shift and he doesn't remain that angry kid, for lack of a better word, because it was a little bit annoying. The final POV that we have is the mother of these 3 children and what she is going through as she loses all of her kids and how she tries to get all of them back. You can tell that she is a mama bear and that she absolutely loves her children and she will do anything to get them back in her life and back to where they're supposed to be. So needless to say, I absolutely love this book. And I have the same things to say about it as I did We Are the Dead. Every voice in this story was unique. Every place that we ended up in this story was unique. And I absolutely adored it. I did, whenever I posted my review on Goodreads, did liken it to Greedfall because it very much reminded me of playing Greedfall whenever I was reading this. And if you've played Greedfall, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, there is this whole colonization aspect to the game, but that's not really what the game is about. It's about the main character finding herself and righting wrongs, and that is kind of how we end up in this book as well. And I just adored it. I can't wait for the next one. Having an arc of a book. It's such a great thing, but you're waiting so long for the next one. I did give this 4.5 stars. I loved it. And like I said, can't wait for the next one. All right, the last book that I read in January just so happens to be the least. So if you guys saw, I have been highly recommended this book for a while now. Why? Because I like enemies to lovers. Because I love Vlad. And I heard mixed reviews on this book. And I have to say, this is the okayest book I've ever read. It was okay. It was okay. The characters were okay. The plot was okay. It was okay. And the writing was okay. Like, it was the okayest book I've ever read. I bought the trilogy because it had been recommended to me so many times. So I should have known. I just looked at the back of it and it said Game of Thrones for teens. Anything compared to Game of Thrones is not Game of Thrones, just so you know. Just so you know. So in this book, we have the children of Vlad who have been sold to settle a debt that Vlad had, and they are raised in the Ottoman Empire. As kind of political refugees, I guess is the only way I could say that. But so the main character ends up falling for the prince that is in line for the Ottoman throne, and so does her brother. It is a very odd thing to read, having a brother and sister going after the same person, having siblings going after the same person. I don't think I've actually read that before. And so there were moments where I was like, really, are we doing this? And why are you two having miscommunication? Because you two are brother and sister. You should be able to talk about this. And it's supposed to be enemies to lovers. No, it's not. I don't know why people say this is enemies to lovers, other than their parents fought. So Romeo and Juliet-esque enemies to lovers, I guess. But this is kind of trying to be Romeo and Juliet, trying to be a historical fiction about Vlad, and trying very hard to be a good book. And it's not. It's okay. It's okay. It's fine. There's nothing really wrong with it. But I don't know that I'm going to continue with the series, because I read it and I was like, well, I feel nothing. I don't feel good. I don't feel bad. I feel nothing. And so I don't know if it's the writing that I didn't click with. I don't know if it was the fact that everything kind of had a meh tone to it. And, you know, the characters themselves weren't really all that fleshed out. So there was no character that you can latch onto and say, yes, I love them. So yeah, this is how I ended my January. And it was just on a kind of meh note. So last but least, this time around. All right, that is it for me. Like, subscribe, do all the fun things, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.